Hey, what's up guys, Somebody here. It's a new episode. We're doing things a little bit different. Remember there was a guy that questioned whether Mamelodi Sundowns are ruining South African football, whether billionaires are ruining South African football. Legal and policy researcher, political analyst, Mighti Jamie. I tracked him down. I found him. We had a conversation. You're about to watch it. Let's go.
That's how it goes?
They keep asking about the best when they know it's me.
Okay.
Asking about the rest when they know it's me.
Straight in, I guess.
You know it's me.
Mighty Jamie, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Now, man, it's a pleasure, man. We actually go a very long way. People don't know that, but let's get into it quickly. So, Mamelodi Sundowns won their sixth league title in a row. And while they were celebrating, it seemed like you're not very happy with the fact that what was going on within South African football. You know, you're speaking about is Billionaires ruining, South African football, is Sundowns ruining South African football, financial fair play. Maybe do you want to expand on what you said?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to start by previewing one of the tweets that I saw you make a few weeks ago when Bafana lost that game. And you were like, how can we lose to a team that is ranked 150th in the world? And that made me start to think about, the performance of the national team in terms of AFCON, World Cup qualifiers. And I think everyone can agree that the performance has not been great. And then when you also look at the top goal scorer in the South African PSL compared to English Premier League, compared to La Liga, compared to a bunch of leagues, you'll see there's a massive difference. So our strikers are not scoring as many goals. The league isn't as goal heavy as other leagues. So there's a quality issue. And see those kind of market failures, underperformances, then for me, because I'm not a soccer expert, you're the soccer expert, but I've done economics, I've looked at competition law when I was studying competition at WITS, and it says to me that the market is not competitive. Right now, to distill that, and this is the point I'm making. My point is about competition, and it seems to me that there's low competition. So the value of competition is that when you have a bunch of people competing in a market, you get innovation, you get quality, right? And if we're talking about a traditional market, that also means benefit to the consumer in the reduction of the price of the product. So you've got different types of markets. You've got a perfect market where you've got multiple competitors who have all got a chance to sell a product and to actually get a customer. And when you have that kind of perfect competition, the price point for a product is as low as it can be because you can just go to another seller.
Yeah.
But then when you start to have market failure, you either have oligopoly or monopoly. Oligopoly is where you have a few players dominating a market, few companies dominating a market. And monopoly is where you have one player dominating a market. So when you have monopoly, what usually happens is that obviously there's no more competition because one guy is dominating that particular thing. But what you then start to see is that the customer service, when there's only one company selling a thing, goes down. If you use Vumatel or you use fiber internet, which is provided by one provider, if you ever have an issue, they'll just tell you, we've logged your call, we'll see you.
Yeah.
And you'll see what happens when it happens. It'll get fixed, but we're not going to give you a timeline. We're not going to give you an estimate, nothing. And they know because it's fiber internet, you can't go anywhere else. You can't get another guy to come and install fiber into the ground for you to access internet. So you're stuck with Vumatel because it's a monopoly, right? What also can happen when you have a monopoly, besides the service delivery, is the actual costs. Things can get very expensive because the guy knows I'm the only guy in town, so I'm going to charge you whatever, right? And markets generally avoid monopolies and oligopolies because they're not good for consumers. It all goes back to the Rockefellers and that period in America where eventually they set up an act which was known as the Sherman Act to regulate competition and make sure that there's competition. Now coming to sports, right? Yeah. You see similar patterns in sports where people say in the NBA, for example, they say, listen, first and foremost, nobody can just get a player if they're coming out of high school or they're coming out of college. We have to do a draft. You have to get a draft pick. Some years, if you are the best guy, you pick last. And if you're the worst guy, you pick first. So the Cleveland Cavaliers in about 2002, they picked LeBron James first, and it transformed their competitiveness. For years, they were now in finals. Almost every year, they were in a final because the draft pick allowed them to have a competitive chance, right? The other way that they do it is that they have salary caps. They'll say, this is how much your team can spend on salaries, right? And they try to moderate whether they are billionaires or multimillionaires to say, you can't spend more than this on salaries as a team. So the teams will try to buy and sell players in consideration of, if we spend $200 million on LeBron James, we can't spend any more players on additional pieces. So because of the caps, right? And what you'll see is that it's very rare to have an NBA team win the NBA championship more than 3 times in a row. In fact, even the most dominant team has not been able to win more than 4 times in a row. So you'll find three repeats. Sometimes you'll find a repeat, but you'll never find like a 6-peat. So what I'm submitting is that a 6-peat, all right, is an indication of lack of competitiveness, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the other teams don't have work to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that other teams who have similar amounts of money can't do it, right? But it does mean that something is wrong in the league when you begin to see six wins going to one team. People say to me, what about, what is it called? That French one, Series A, what is it called?
You good.
Yeah, so people say that. And I said, look, but if you go and check, PSG, at most, they've only ever won 4, right? But you actually have some rotation there. So if you now look 6 in a row, right? And then you then begin to think, is the league actually competitive? Right now, if you look at the log tables, and I've got them open right here, Sundowns has played 25 games. They're on 61 points. The next team is Pirates. They're on 43 points, right? That's an 18-point difference, 25 games into the season. That's a massive difference. It's a massive, massive difference, showing you that you have so much dominance. And when you then think about what Brian Malloy said, he said that we're not talking about the main thing in South African soccer. That's what he said. He said we need financial play because one team is buying all the players. They're also buying all the technical staff. And they're putting people who could be playing in rival teams on the bench, right? So that they don't, it's defensive strategy. You know, in business, you've got some offensive strategy and some defensive strategy. For instance, if you register a name, playing the field with sheikhs, you may also register defensive names, right? Which have to do with sheikhs in soccer, sheikhs like this, sheikhs on the field. All of those, you're trying to make sure that somebody can't copy your name and benefit from what you're doing. So it's a defensive strategy to buy all of these players and put them on the bench, right? It does help you when they're training against each other to stay sharp. Obviously, when you have money, it's not enough to just have money. You can be rich and fail. Michael Bloomberg was a billionaire, is a billionaire, ran for president, and it flopped because money by itself is not enough. But if you're a billionaire who's throwing endless money into the thing and you do all the other basics, you're going to have an advantage that becomes insurmountable, you know? And for me, the evidence is exactly what we are seeing. I mean, in the last 8 years, seven championships, you have to then say, is this natural dominance or an indication now that there's a competition failure? And in competition law, you know, what we often try to do is we'll identify whether someone is a dominant player, and that's based on market share to say, if you're 45% or more of a market, we're normally considered a dominant player. Then we also assess, is there abuse of dominance, right? And then if you deem that someone is a dominant player and they're abusing dominance, then you regulate to manage competition. So what I was saying and what I maintain is that when you look at the quality of play, there's an issue. If you look at the goals scored in the league, there's an issue. Then you got to say, but is our league competitive? Why does that matter, right? If people don't think that the league is competitive, they're not going to come and watch the games anymore. Because what's the point of playing Monopoly when one guy already has all the hotels? Why would I want to play that game? What's the point of watching a soccer season when I already know that this season, our team, whatever team I support, is going to be beat by 19 points, 20 points. That's too much of a difference. And then anywhere else, think about it, like you wouldn't want to go play basketball with LeBron James, right? Because it's not a competition. It's not fun if you don't have a chance to win. So if people stop watching, the advertisers stop coming as much because there's no eyeballs, right? There's only going to be eyeballs for Chiefs versus Pirates. There's only going to be eyeballs for a few big matches. But why would I watch the rest of the league when there's nothing to play for, right? Because maybe relegation matches are nice to watch to see who's going to stay in the league. But it becomes boring if the same guy wins every time. And what that does down the table is you've got maybe Sundowns, Pirates, Chiefs, SuperSport, who people are making a lot of money. But if you're now at the bottom of the log, if the sport is not attractive, if there's no advertisers coming in, that means every other player is now going to be just scraping through because there's no money. So if you don't have competition, it doesn't just affect the audience, it also affects the players and the support staff, because now people don't want to go to stadiums. What's the point if it's not exciting? And that's fundamentally what I wanted to put across. But if you also think about the reason why the Super League was rejected when it was suggested, what did people say that they didn't want the Super League? They said, this is going to kill competition in soccer. That's what they said. And everyone agreed with them, right? I had a little bit of a different opinion because I think you can still have NBA is still competitive. I think you can do it in a way that works. But the argument was, we don't want a Super League because we want competition, right? We want to have different players be able to win UEFA, different teams, etc., etc. So right now, if you look at South African soccer, you can't say there's competition if one guy wins 7 times out of 8 and 6 times in a row. And they're likely to win next year. I mean, at this rate, these guys could win till 2030. Who's going to still be watching?
No, man, Jamie, and for real, I've obviously heard in terms of what you had to say. And I think there's a lot of things that you do make sense in with regards to Mamelodi Sundowns. The standard of South African football at this current moment, is it not at the best place, without a shadow of a doubt. And there's a lot of factors that go into the fact that why it's not necessarily so successful. One of the things could be development. Development is not as great as what it used to be. Back in the day when South African football, or I guess Bafana was at its highest competitive level, was when we had players like Billy McCarthy playing in the international leagues. You had the likes of Stephen Pienaar being competitive for over 10 years within the Premier League. Like, we don't have a player of that stature as well. And I heard what you were saying in terms of obviously Sundowns dominating.
But
and one thing
about it, they were competitive because the league was rotating. No, so you could play in local soccer and then get drafted to go play in the Premier League. But now the agents are not going to come watch the soccer because it's not competitive.
But that's the thing. People have it misunderstood in the sense that why is Sundowns dominating in the way that they are? So the model of Sundowns always having to buy the best players is something that they've always done. They've always done it in the past. They've always brought even the most expensive managers. They brought a manager from Netherlands. They brought a manager from Spain. They brought the best that they could. Hristo Stoichkov also came in as well. But they were not winning in the same way Chiefs was winning, in the same way Orlando Pirates was winning. So what did Sundowns do? They realized we're throwing a lot of money at it, but we're not getting anything of a return in that money. Then they decided to bring in a person like Peter Msmani, who comes into the club, and then they develop a philosophy, bring back that piano and shoe shine football that they were playing the whole time, and decide that they want to dominate within Africa. And that's always been the plan. So the thing is that Jamie now sees 7 league titles in a row, or 7 league titles in 8 years. That's what Jamie sees right now. But what Jamie doesn't see is the groundwork that was done when Peter Msmani came in the early 2013, 2014, 2012 season that he came into Mamelodi Sundowns and developed the strategy in terms of how they were playing.
Ibrahimovic put money in, and then he put Jose Mourinho, and they got good players, and they had a system, and it worked for them, right?
100%.
But we can't ignore the fact that the money is what was able to bring everything together. So what you're saying is that the early experiments didn't work, but now their experiments are working, and they're working too well. right? So what is the chance that any other team has going forward? And
so
what does
the
that
chance
do for some?
So the chance is that they brought the best in the business where Petrus Money is within his career. He finds himself in Saudi Arabia, and that's why he's the coach that is. Now people are calling for him to be the Bafana coach. So they get the best coach, local coach, get all the technical stuff that they can for the best that they could, and then they formulate a philosophy that can play together. Now the difference is that Sundowns over the past probably 10 years have only had about maybe 2 coach changes. There was Peter Msmane, he left, then they brought in Mighti and as well as Rulani, and they kept on that continuity. There were seasons within the last 10 years where Kaizer Chiefs was rivaling Mamelodi Sundowns, where Orlando Pirates was rivaling Mamelodi Sundowns, and the points gap was a little bit closer. But the difference is between the two teams is that Orlando Pirates never kept that longevity. The coach changes were happening. The player changes were happening. Even Kaizer Chiefs, the same thing too. They did not carry on in terms of a philosophy that they wanted to do. And you speak about the fact that obviously they get the players, they've got the money and stuff. The likes of Kaizer Chiefs are also likely to get a Kama Billiards. The Orlando Pirates are likely to get Temikosi Lodge. Like really good players within South Africa, but it's how you formulate a team that you can build a very good team around them, and that's what Mamelodi Sundowns have been able to do. Kaizer Chiefs have been very competitive as well within the market, having to bring in the players. It's just that they've not been able to formulate something that can go on for such a long time. We don't even know how they play. They've changed many times. One time the ball is in the air, one time the ball is on the floor. So Sundowns has continued that ruthlessness of trying to be competitive on the continent, and having been competitive on the continent allows them to be even further than some of the teams here on the local scene. So yes, Jamie does not like seeing that, and I did not like seeing that too, up until I had to watch and realize that, snap, they have a philosophy in place. Now they're introducing youth players in place.
Let me ask you this. I get the argument. Let me ask you 2 questions. Number one, do you think if Al Ali got Saka and all of these players to play for them, that won every AFCON moving forward, we would be happy with that? And 2, do you think that it's okay to have financial fair play or some kind of salary caps like they have in the NBA?
Well, if you're talking about if Al Ahly was able to buy the likes of Saka, was able to buy the likes of Martinelli, of course they would be very competitive. But the difference in the Premier League, what we're able
they would win. They would just win by themselves.
No, they would win. But also, when you see where Arsenal is right now, they planned that. It's not like they got there with Arteta just the next day. Arteta's been there. It's his 4th season at this current moment. Does Kaizer Chiefs do that? Does Orlando Pirates do that? Does Cape Town City do that? Do they plan in order to be competitive? Because as much as City do spend a lot of money, I don't think other teams here do plan in the long term. Do we need a financial fair play within South Africa? I think we do need a financial fair play within South Africa, but it has to be a model that works for us, because financial fair play has to deal with what money the clubs are making. And a lot of the clubs don't even have sponsors, like you said. And without sponsors, and they're only being financed by their owners. Now, if they're only being financed by their owners, then a lot of clubs are going to be crippled by the financial fair play, because the likes of Chiefs have got Vodacom, whereas other teams don't even have anything on their shirt as well. If financial fair play comes in and it regulates, because a lot of things would have to be seen, a lot of things would have to be transparent, and I don't think the PSL is necessarily ready for that, because not every other team has those kind of sponsors as well, and would not be able to carry themselves because they have to rely on the money of the owners, and that would leave the top 3 always keep on dominating within a sense. So financial fair play, it would have to be a model that we create for ourselves and how it works for ourselves in order to regulate that.
Yeah, look, I think you're more open to some of this stuff than people just who have been just jumping in, because maybe the NBA model is worth considering, because it's not like just the financial fair play is the only model of regulating this, but there has to be an appreciation that, and even a monopoly will have to do some things right, especially if it's a monopoly in this kind of an environment, right? You don't just dominate because you had money. You need money and then the other fundamentals. But if you have all the fundamentals and limitless money, eventually you win and other people can't win against you. But I do think that right now, as things stand, some of the qualitative things people are concerned about in South African soccer are because all of the players are playing for one team and they're not competing in the market. and there's no incentives for the other players in the other teams to go as hard as they can, because one team is going to dominate. I mean, when you're losing by like 18 points and you're number 2, you're not even close. We're talking about the Premier League right now, and there's a 6 points different. In fact, if you look at City, they have a game in hand. That's a competitive league. There's a lot of money still there, but the league is still competitive. You mess around, you lose your position, right? You won't win the league. But now in the South African PSL, it looks right now like it will be one team dominating. And that's not fun to watch. That's not good for the players in the other teams. And unless we can have that conversation, I think we'll gloss over everything and just say, well, they did 1, 2, 3, and therefore just take it and just accept it. But what about the impact of that dominance on the whole Premier Soccer League and South African soccer?
The one thing to show is that I certainly agree with you in the sense that the competitiveness is not as great. And obviously people are asking themselves, because if you have to even ask me as someone who watches local football, and it's sad to say this in the sense that I can see Sundowns winning maybe the next 5, or maybe even winning the next 10, because there's a level of continuity that they have, and it's definitely not good in any way that they are going to be winning all the time. The one thing I do appreciate about Sundowns is that they always want to compete at the highest level. You can just see it, even in the way that they've planned. Even they want that, like, we've never had a team compete on the continent in the way Sundowns is doing it. Even in the heydays of Kaizer Chiefs or the heydays of Orlando Pirates, we never had a team that said, you know what, we want to compete with Al Ahly, Wydad. I mean, we did Casablanca, or one of Esperance. We want to compete with those guys. They are absolutely doing that right now, and they're in the quarterfinals. And when you talk about the competitive leagues outside, maybe Arsenal, something that was planned over time with Arteta, Liverpool that went toe-to-toe with Manchester City and Jurgen Klopp, they planned that. Jurgen Klopp's been at the club for such a long time. Is there a way to compete with Mamelodi Sundowns? I think there's definitely a way. One of the most embarrassing things for me, Jamie, is the fact that Mamelodi Sundowns only needed 59 points to win the league out of a potential 90. So why can't one team just plan and say, you know what, we don't have to beat Mamelodi Sundowns, but let's beat the rest. Let's at least get 75 points then. And Sundowns can maybe get 90, and let's build on sort of catching them bit by bit by bit, because we've got some other good players at other clubs as well. For example, Jabal Ngobo is someone who's playing for Kaizer Chiefs. So he is someone, before he came to Kaizer Chiefs, he was announced as Defender of the Season. Defender of the Season. He comes to Kaizer Chiefs, and now all of a sudden, his performances have just dwindled. And I think it's down to coaching. The same as on Orlando Pirates, for an example. They had Tulani Hlatshwayo as well, who was the Bafana captain. He started every game before Bafana. He won a league title at Wits. And now he goes to Orlando Pirates, and all of a sudden, his career goes down. Then he goes to SuperSport, and suddenly he's competing with SuperSport to finish second. So you ask yourself, why are players going to Orlando Pirates and maybe not necessarily improving? Why are players going to Kaizer Chiefs and not necessarily improving? Why is that Sundowns, on the other hand, they can get a Peter Shalile and he grows even better? Or a Khuliso Madao, for example, who comes from a relegation team and they improve even better. So there's a coaching thing that is going there that I think is going right. I do think their finances help. They do help in a massive way. There's no denying that. But one thing I am admiring about Mamelodi Sundowns is just how they're using their resources. And I think you can't tell me the likes of Pirates, Chiefs, or even Cape Town City, or even SuperSport United don't have resources enough to get more than 59 points. I mean, surely, I think they do. I just think it's a thing of they don't necessarily plan in the way that Arsenal does. They don't necessarily plan in the way that an Atletico Madrid does. Atletico Madrid is competing with Barca and Real Madrid every single season. You look at even at Ligue 1, where PSG is dominating there. We did win 4 in a row, but Lille was competing with them. Lille, they don't even have the same finances as PSG does. But how are they able to do it? Leicester won it the 1 year. And yes, it happens once in every blue moon or something. But at the time when Pirates were very close to Mamelodi Sundowns, they just did not keep on going. Kaizer Chiefs, the same thing too. And that's my frustration, Jamie.
Look, I think they should definitely consult with you, Pirates, Chiefs, and these other teams, get your view and try to fix some of the issues. And I don't think your criticisms of those teams are unfair. What I've said is just like when I look at this one element, right, which is basically what you would do if you're looking at it from an economic perspective, a competition law perspective. It's not that the other companies in the market can't also sell products. What
Yeah.
you're also now saying is, but when I look at this particular guy, how is that affecting things? So fundamentally, I think, even if we are correct that other teams have got issues, right? The discussion that I was having was just to say, let us look at this particular entity and make an assessment of whether or not this kind of dominance is beginning to hurt the overall game internally. And that's not to take away from what they're doing internationally, because you need to compete internationally. And I think it does make South Africans proud when they win or when they're competitive. So basically, what I'm trying to say is I accept that there are criticisms of other teams. I accept what you said about coaching. I accept what you said about player development and how certain players have done well, for instance, at Wits, and then they just flopped when they went to other teams, right? I accept that. What I'm saying is we need to make an assessment of the impact of this kind of dominance on the local league. That's not to say that I don't think that it's important for Sundowns to be competitive on the African continent. I think everybody wants that. He loves it when they see that. The question is, at what cost? And then if there is a cost and there's a harm, right, that exists to the local game, then there are questions that need to be asked about how do we protect the performance quality while giving other teams the same opportunity to compete at that level. When you're trying to make a market competitive, you're not trying to take the best guy down. You're trying to say, how do we make it such that other players have a chance? Because that's what makes soccer entertaining. And we mustn't forget that soccer is an entertainment industry product. It's sports entertainment. If it's no longer entertaining, exhilarating, because part of that entertainment factor is quality of play, quality of passes, great players. That's part of it. You know, you want to see Saka play well. You want to see all of these guys do well. But on the other side, it's also about, being at the seat of your pants, at the edge of your seat, so to speak, and seeing a team do well. And then you don't know how it's going to go. And then you watch till the very last minute because anything can happen. And there's that old saying that everyone likes to say, the ball is round, any team can win. That's what makes soccer exciting, because any moment you can have a magic moment. But now, if the ball is no longer round and no other team can win except one team, then what's the buy-in for a viewer when they can watch Last of Us, when they can watch The Wife, when they can watch all of these other reality TV shows that they have options to watch, right? What's the in? If you lose the entertainment part of sports entertainment and one team continues to dominate, eventually that has an impact on the health of the PSL. That's all I'm saying. That's really my submission. That's all I'm saying about this thing.
No, 100%, Jamie. And I certainly agree with you in the sense that, of course, if one team is winning all the time, then it's not going to be very helpful to the league as well. My biggest wish, now that I'm closing out, my biggest wish is just in the same way Arsenal have done against Manchester City, or Liverpool have done over the years in the past, or Lille have done in France, or an Atletico Madrid have done in Spain. My biggest wish is some of these other teams can look at Mamelodi Sundowns and say, you know what, if we plan right, we can actually beat this guy, and not go in there with fear and sort of have a long-term strategy as well, because Sundowns have a long-term strategy and it's something that they're going to keep doing, but you can compete against them. That's for sure. But Jamie, you've been a great first guest. Thank you so much for being on my show. Hopefully you keep well, and I'm wishing you all the best, man.
Thank you so much, man. And I'm wishing your show and every step that you take all the blessings, man. I think you are passionate about the game and you're educating the audience and you are adding value to the street. So that's much appreciated, man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
It's time for our weekly bet of the week. The purpose of this segment is to show you my bet slip in hopes that it helps yours light and green. The more accurate, the more cash you get. Let's get into it. The Champions League returns tonight, and I've put Champions League games and one Premier League game as well. Forget the games tonight. Let's talk about tomorrow. Bayern Munich against Manchester City over 2.5. Inter against Benfica, over 1.5. And last but not least, Arsenal against Southampton. Arsenal and over 2.5. The odds 3.20. So with just $500, I triple my money to 1.6 with that win boost. And those are my selections. That is Bet of the Week, sponsored by Betway. Remember to practice responsible betting at betway.co.za. Until the next one, all the best. We've come to the end of the show. Let me know, guys, what do you guys think of the conversation between me and Mighti Jamie? Should we have more of these, talking about South African football with another guest? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're notified for future episodes.